Have you ever been so kind, so helpful, so available that people started thinking you're weak? Have you ever sacrificed your peace just to keep someone happy, only to be taken for granted? Today, I'm not here to tell you to stop being kind. I'm here to tell you, stop being too friendly where it's not valued. Even a tree gives shade, but it does not bend for anyone. You are meant to radiate light, not let others drain it. In this world, we've been told again and again to be kind, to be giving, to spread love, and yes, these are virtues. But somewhere, we've misunderstood. Kindness does not mean being a doormat. Friendship does not mean losing your dignity. Too much friendliness, especially with those who do not value your time, your soul, your purpose, can quietly become a trap. The same God who told us to love also gave us the wisdom to discern. We must learn to say no with love, to walk away with grace, and to protect our energy like a sacred temple. Because when your life becomes a marketplace of pleasing others, your inner peace becomes the currency you lose. Today, I will share 7 divine lessons, not religious, but spiritually rooted truths that will help you live with strength, boundaries, and self-respect. Let's begin. Kindness is a beautiful trait, a divine quality that reflects compassion, empathy, and understanding. But when kindness comes without boundaries, it quietly becomes a form of self-betrayal. It's like pouring water endlessly into a broken cup. No matter how much you give, it keeps leaking away, leaving you empty. In our day-to-day lives, we often wear a smile, offer help, say yes, when we want to say no, just to keep relationships smooth, to avoid conflict, or to maintain a reputation of being the good one. But deep within, a silent storm brews, of exhaustion, frustration, and a strange sense of being used. Let's take a simple example. Imagine a person named Ayesha. Aisha is the kind of person everyone calls when they're in trouble. Need a ride? Call Aisha. Need help with work at the last minute? Call Aisha. Need someone to listen to your endless emotional drama? Aisha is always there. People praise her for being helpful, for being selfless. And yes, she feels good at first. But over time, something changes. She starts noticing that people only reach out when they need something. No one asks her how she is doing. No one shows up when she needs help. Her phone is full of chats that start with, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" She begins to feel invisible, like her presence only matters when she's useful. This is the danger of kindness without boundaries. Aisha's story is not rare. It's happening in homes, offices, friendships, and families every single day. So many people are silently screaming inside while smiling outside. They have taught others that they will always say yes. And so no one even thinks to ask, "Is this okay for you?" That's not kindness. That's emotional imprisonment masked as generosity. When you say, "Ah yes," to others while saying, "No," to yourself, you're not being kind. You're being unfair to your own soul. And the tragedy is, the world rarely tells you to stop. Society rewards self-sacrifice, even if it costs you your mental peace. You're told that being good means being available. But the truth is, being truly good also means being wise. Wisdom is knowing to give and when to preserve. Wisdom is knowing that your cup must be full before you can pour into others. Think of your life as a mobile phone. If you keep giving your phone to everyone, letting them drain its battery, handing it over without a charger, one day it will shut down. Mid-conversation, mid-task, mid-help. People will walk away frustrated, but no one will ask why it was never recharged. That's your responsibility. Your emotional battery, your mental peace, your spiritual health. They are your sacred duties to protect. Some people may say, But isn't kindness about selflessness? Yes, but not self-erasure. Being kind doesn't mean being absent from your own life. You can be helpful without being drained. You can be generous without being taken for granted. That line is drawn by boundaries. When you tell someone, I'd love to help, but I need rest right now, you are not being rude. You are being real. And real kindness starts with honesty. Honesty with others, and most importantly, honesty with yourself. Now, let's talk about respect. When you set boundaries, you teach people how to treat you. If you're always available, always agreeable, always adjusting, people will assume that's your role. They won't even notice they're crossing the line, because to them there is no line. You never showed them one. But the moment you start saying, I'm not okay with this, or I need some space, the atmosphere shifts. Some people may react negatively. That's okay. Their reaction is not your responsibility. Your job is not to keep everyone comfortable. Your job is to be in alignment with your inner peace. The most inspiring part of this journey is that once you learn to say yes to yourself, you'll attract the right people. Those who don't just take, but also give. Those who value your time, your energy, your values, your boundaries. You'll begin to see how much stronger your relationships become when they're built on mutual respect, not silent expectations. And more importantly, you'll notice something powerful growing within your self-trust. You'll trust yourself to choose wisely, to speak up, to protect your peace, and to walk away when necessary. That's not just emotional intelligence. That's spiritual intelligence. So next time you feel pulled to say wise, when your soul whispers, no, pause, breathe. Remember this. Kindness is not measured by how much you suffer for others. True kindness uplifts both the giver and the receiver. It leaves no one drained. Be kind, but not at the cost of your clarity. Be generous, but not at the cost of your joy. Be available, but not at the cost of your value. Kindness is a light. Don't let it flicker in the wind of people's expectations. Shield it with wisdom. Let it shine not because others demand it, but because you choose it, with purpose, with balance, and with strength. People don't truly value what is handed to them without effort. This is not bitterness. It's human psychology. What we fight for, what we earn, what we chase after. These are the things we treasure. And when someone gives themselves away too easily, always available, always saying yes, always adjusting, the world begins to see them not as a person of value, but as someone who has nothing better to do. That's why it's saying people respect what you protect, not what you give away too freely. Let's consider a common example. Imagine a man named Umar who works in an office. He's smart, talented, and very helpful. Every time someone needs a shift covered, he says yes. Every time his boss asks for extra hours, Umar agrees. Even if it means missing his family dinners. He thinks being the go-to guy will win him respect. But weeks turn into months, and instead of being appreciated, he becomes invisible. People don't say thank you anymore. They expect it from him. The more he gives, the less he's seen. The more available he is, the less they consider his time valuable. Umar starts to feel used, taken for granted. But why did this happen? Not because he was unkind, but because he didn't place a boundary between generosity and self-respect. He made himself too accessible, too easy to approach, too ready to sacrifice. And sadly, the world mistook his goodness for weakness. Now contrast this with someone who has clear boundaries. Someone who offers help, yes, but also says, I can't do that right now. Or, I'm already committed. This person may seem tough at first, but slowly, people begin to respect them. Why? Because they value their own time. Their attention is earned, not assumed. When they give, people feel honored. When they speak, people listen. Because their energy is not scattered. It is sacred. Think about a rare gemstone. If you place a diamond on every street corner, soon people will walk past it without even noticing. But place that same diamond in a protected glass case with limited access, and suddenly people admire it, desire it, and recognize its worth. That's the difference between being available to all and being selective. Not out of pride, but out of principle. This principle applies not only in work, but also in relationships. Sometimes in friendships or romantic partnerships, one person gives far more than the other. They call first, they adjust their schedule, they apologize first, even when they're not wrong. At first, it may seem like love, but slowly, it turns into imbalance. The giver becomes exhausted, and the taker becomes entitled. The relationship is no longer mutual. It becomes a silent performance of sacrifice from one side. And what's worse, when the giver finally pauses or says no, the taker becomes angry. Not because the act was wrong, but because the pattern was broken. When you give too much of yourself without setting limits, you're not just building connections, you're building expectations. And breaking those expectations can feel like betrayal, even when you're finally standing up for yourself. So how do we shift this dynamic? By understanding one powerful truth: your time, your presence, your energy. These are not unlimited resources. They are your divine assets. You must invest them where they grow, not where they get drained. That means being mindful of who you give your energy to. That means pausing before saying yes. That means recognizing when someone is respecting your time and when they're simply using it for convenience. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is, "Let me think about it." Those 5 words restore your power. They give you space to assess, to breathe, to reflect. You don't owe instant access to anyone. And those who truly value you will understand. In fact, let's go deeper. What does God teach us through nature? Even the sun, the source of all light and warmth, rises and sets. It gives light during the day, but it rests at night. It shines, but it also disappears, so that it's missed, so that people wait for its return, so that its value is remembered. If the self takes time to rest, to recharge, to retreat, why do we think we must shine constantly? This wisdom applies to emotional availability too. If you're always there for someone without ever pulling back to nourish your own soul, you become emotionally exhausted. And when that exhaustion kicks in, resentment follows. That's when kindness turns into bitterness. That's when you start feeling unseen, unheard, and unappreciated. But the truth is, it wasn't them who forgot your value. It was you who never showed them how valuable you are. Start protecting your time. Not with walls, but with doors. Doors that open for the right people, for the right moments. Stop apologizing for having limits. Stop justifying your silence. Not every message must be replied to immediately. Not every favor must be accepted. Not every call must be picked up. You are allowed to be selective. You are allowed to put yourself first, not because others don't matter, but because you do. And once you start doing that, something powerful will happen. The same people who once took you for granted will begin to pause before asking. They will speak more gently. They will respect your time, your words, your silence. Why? Because you taught them to. Because you showed them that your kindness is not free-flowing water. It is sacred deep. It is divine, and it must be respected. In the end, the world doesn't just respect your love. It respects how you love yourself, and when you protect your energy, you don't just inspire others, you set a standard that they rise to meet. Saying no is one of the hardest things for many people, not because they don't want to say it, but because they're afraid of what will follow. Will the other person get upset? Will they stop liking me? Will I seem selfish, rude, uncaring? These thoughts loop endlessly in the minds of those who are used to putting others first. But here's the truth that often gets buried under guilt: saying no is not a sin. It is a statement of self-respect. It is a boundary. It is clarity. And in a world that constantly demands more from you, saying no is often the most honest, powerful, and necessary thing you can do for your well-being. Let's imagine a young woman named Hiba. She's hardworking, sincere, and always smiling. People love her for her warm nature, and she is always ready to help, whether it's staying late at work, covering for a colleague, or attending every family event, even if she's emotionally drained. But behind her constant yes is a person who is secretly exhausted. She sacrifices sleep, skips meals, cancels her own plans, and swallows her own stress just to meet others' expectations. And even then, people find ways to complain. Why didn't you reply earlier? You could have done a little more. Hiba begins to feel like no matter what she gives, it's never enough. Her kindness, instead of bringing her peace, is now her prison. One day, her younger sibling asks her, "Do you ever get tired of saying yes to everyone?" She smiles weakly, then quietly says, "Every single day." That one sentence speaks volumes. It reveals a life where the word no has been buried under layers of obligation, guilt, and the fear of disappointing others. But what Hiba, and so many like her, don't realize is that every yes that comes from fear, from pressure, from guilt is actually a no to herself. It is a rejection of her own needs, her own rest, her own time. What would happen if she started saying no? At first, the world might resist. People may raise eyebrows, act surprised, or even push back. But slowly, the atmosphere would shift. People would realize her time is not for free. Her energy is not an unlimited resource. She's not a machine. They will begin to treat her like a person. That respect begins with one word: no. Let's look at this differently. If you walk into a shop and ask for a product, and the seller says, "I'm sorry, we're closed for the day," you don't get offended. You accept it. Why? Because you respect their boundary. You understand that every place, every service, every person has limits. But somehow, when it comes to our personal lives, we forget this. We feel we must always be available, always agreeable, always giving. But you were not created to be on call for everyone's needs 247. You were created with purpose, with rhythm, with the right to rest and recharge. Saying no also teaches people not to assume. Often, when you constantly say yes, people stop asking and start expecting. That's where entitlement begins. They stop seeing your effort. They stop thanking you. And if one day you hesitate or decline, they treat it as betrayal. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they were never taught to value your limits. But once you start saying no, when it's necessary, you teach people how to appreciate your lies. It becomes meaningful again. It becomes a gift, not a default. Imagine a man named Salman. He has always been the one agree to every social gathering, every extra responsibility, every favor. He never wanted to disappoint anyone. But over time, he noticed something painful. People didn't really care how he was doing. They cared about what he could do for them. That's when he decided to change. He began to prioritize his time. He stopped overcommitting. He stopped saying yes to things that drained him. At first, some people were confused. A few were upset. But eventually, something beautiful happened. He began to feel alive again. He had time for his passions. He reconnected with his peace. And the people who truly loved him stayed. The ones who left, they were only there for what he could offer, not for who he was. This transformation begins with the courage to say no without apology, to pause before agreeing, to honor your needs without guilt, to understand that your worth is not tied to how many people you please. You are not defined by how much you give away. You are defined by how much you value yourself and show others how to value you too. Saying no doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're arrogant. It simply means you're wise enough to protect your energy for the things that truly matter. You become more intentional, more focused, more peaceful. And in the long run, you become more available. Not to everyone, but to the right people, in the right ways at the right time. So if you've spent years swallowing your no, just to keep others happy, maybe it's time to reclaim it. Not of rebellion, but out of self-love. Speak it softly. Speak it kindly. But speak it clearly. Because when you finally learn to say no without guilt, you open the door to a life that says yes to your soul. Not everyone deserves an explanation. It's a truth that sounds bold, even rebelling chose. But it's one of the most freeing and self-empowering realizations a person can have. So many of us live trapped in the constant pressure of over-explaining ourselves. Why we didn't reply, why we said no, why we chose a certain path, why we feel a certain way. And while honesty and clarity are important, there is a line where explanation becomes emotional exhaustion. When you start feeling the need to justify every small decision in your life to keep others comfortable, you slowly begin to less for yourself and more for their approval. Consider the story of Zainab, a young woman who is thoughtful and kind. She deeply cares about others, and naturally, she also cares what others think of her. But this kindness becomes a heavy burden. When she doesn't show up for an event, she feels the need to type long messages explaining every detail. I was tired. There was traffic. I wasn't feeling well. When she chooses not to engage in a group activity, she over-justifies. I had to help my parents. I had office work. I didn't mean to ignore anyone. And still, sometimes people question her. Are you okay? Is something wrong? You've changed. No matter how carefully she explains, it never feels enough. And slowly, she realizes she's giving more energy to defending her choices than actually living them. This is the trap of over-explaining. It comes from a place of fear, the fear of being misunderstood, judged, or rejected. But the reality is, no matter how clearly you speak, people will still see things through their own filters. You could write 1,000 words, but someone with a closed heart will still twist your silence into offense. You could bend over backward to explain your decisions, and still someone might say, "You think you're better than us. So what's the point?" The truth is, the people who trust you don't need long explanations. And the ones who don't trust, you won't believe them anyway. There's wisdom in brevity. There's strength in being okay with being misunderstood. It takes emotional maturity to say, I don't owe anyone my life story just to make a simple choice. You can decline an invitation with a smile and no reasons. You can distance yourself from toxic environments without explaining why. You can rest, reset, and recharge without sending updates to everyone. Your inner peace doesn't need to be debated. Your no can be a complete sentence. Your decision can be your decision. Period. Let's reflect on daily life. A boy named Hasan chooses to leave a WhatsApp group where he no longer feels mentally at ease. Immediately, a few friends message him. What happened? Why did you leave? Did someone say something? For a moment, he thinks of typing a long, detailed explanation about how the conversations were draining, how he's trying to focus more on his studies, how he needs a break. But then he stops himself. He remembers a line he once read: "Your peace does not need to be negotiated." So instead, he replies kindly but firmly, "I just needed to step back for a while. Hope you all are doing well. That's it. No drama, no guilt, just truth, clean and clear." And guess what? Some people didn't understand. Some assumed things. But the important ones respected his space. And Hasan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. The relief of not defending his peace. This mindset is not arrogance. It's emotional discipline. You're not closing yourself off from the world. You're simply choosing not to waste your breath on people who demand explanations but don't offer empathy. You're preserving your mental clarity for those who genuinely care, who ask with love, who don't need a PowerPoint presentation to believe in your heart. Even in families, this lesson matters deeply. Sometimes, cultural and social pressures make us feel like we owe everyone an explanation for how we live, what we choose, where we go. But slowly, you must learn to detach from the fear of being talked about. People will talk whether you explain or not. Their opinions are not your obligation. What matters is that your life aligns with your values, your peace, and your Creator. In the end, real strength is quiet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't debate endlessly. It simply moves with purpose. When you stop over-explaining, you begin to walk with a certain dignity. You give others the gift of mystery, and yourself the gift of freedom. You stop chasing validation and start living in alignment. That is when you stop reacting to opinions and start responding to life. And in that stillness, in that confidence, you will realize peace is not in being understood by everyone. Peace is in understanding yourself so deeply that you no longer need to be. So the next time you feel the need to explain your absence, your silence, your choices, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this to connect or just to be accepted? If it's the latter, breathe it and let it go. You don't need to explain your growth. It's visible to those with open hearts and invisible to those who never saw you clearly anyway. Let your actions speak. Let your energy answer, and let your life rise, not with permission, but with quiet, unstoppable truth. Love is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. It heals, connects, uplifts, and transforms. But love does not mean tolerating disrespect. This is a lesson too many people learn the hard way. After they've been walked over, silenced, ignored, or used in the name of love. Love should never cost your dignity. If someone claims to love you, but consistently disrespects your time, your voice, or your boundaries, or your emotions, that is not love. That is control. That is convenience. That is emotional manipulation dressed in sweet words. True love honors. True love listens. True loves not cross your limits and then ask you to stay quiet about it. Yet, in daily life, many of us allow lines to be crossed again and again, all in the hope of preserving relationships. We tell ourselves, it's okay, they didn't mean it. Or worse, if I speak up, they'll leave me. And so, we choose silence over truth, peace over confrontation, and slowly, we start losing ourselves in the process. Imagine a young woman named Sana. She is in a relationship with someone who started out kind and affectionate. But over time, his behavior changed. He began making sarcastic remarks about her appearance, interrupting her when she spoke, demanding she explain every little thing. At first, Sana brushed it off. He's just tired. He's stressed. But deep inside, she knew this wasn't right. This wasn't how love should feel. She felt nervous around him, always on edge, like she had to be careful with her words just to avoid an argument. That's not love. That's fear wrapped in attachment. But Sana, like many others, kept telling herself that love means patience. And yes, love does require patience, but not at the cost of self-respect. She thought that if she was understanding enough, things would change. But here's the harsh truth: when you tolerate disrespect once, it becomes permission for it to continue. Silence is often mistaken for acceptance, and people will treat you based on the behavior you allow. Respect is the soul of any healthy relationship, whether it's between lovers, friends, siblings, or colleagues. Without mutual respect, love becomes a one-sided sacrifice. Think of a garden. Love is the water, but respect is the sunlight. You need both to grow something beautiful. If someone waters you with affection but keeps you in the dark with neglect or insult, you will never bloom. You will only survive, but you were not born to survive love. You were born to thrive in it. Take another daily life example. A boy named Usman has a best friend who constantly jokes about his dreams. Every time Usman shares his goals, his friend says, "You, do be serious." Or he interrupts him during conversations, laughs at his ideas, and never supports him when he's struggling. But because they've been friends for years, Usman convinces himself that this is normal. He's just like that. He jokes with everyone. But slowly, Usman starts doubting himself. He stops sharing. He becomes quieter. And the saddest part, he starts believing the disrespect. This is what happens when we stay silent in the face of repeated hurting. We begin to absorb it as truth. It is not your duty to stay where you are disrespected just to prove you are loyal. Loyalty should never require you to shrink yourself. If someone can't treat you with basic human decency, they don't deserve the gift of your presence. Because your energy, your time, your love, these are sacred. Not everyone should have access to them. Just because someone has known you for a long time doesn't mean they have the right to mistreat you. Time does not equal respect. Consistency in behavior does. Often people say, "But I love them," as a reason to stay in toxic situations. But the real question is, do you love yourself enough to walk away when love starts feeling like pain? Do you respect your own spirit enough to say, "This is not how I deserve to be treated"? Because at the core of every healthy relationship is self-respect. The way you allow others to treat you sets the tone for every relationship you have. This applies not just to romantic relationships, but to family too. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those closest to us. People who think they can say anything, do anything, and still be forgiven because of blood ties. But family should not be an excuse for repeated disrespect. The same rule applies. Love without respect is not love. It's obligation, fear, and guilt pretending to be something noble. It's okay to love someone from a distance. It's okay to say, "I care for you, but I won't let you speak to me like that." You don't need to yell. You don't need to fight. But you do need to be clear, be calm, be strong. "I'm not okay with this behavior. I deserve to be spoken to with kindness. I expect to be treated with respect." These are not rude statements. These are declarations of self-worth. And the people who truly love you will adjust. They may need time. They may not understand at first, but they will learn. Because real love grows when it is rooted in respect. And if someone walks away because you finally set boundaries, let them. You didn't lose love. You lost someone who only loved the version of you that kept quiet. The real you, the one who speaks up, stands tall, and protects their peace, will attract the kind of love that feels safe, supportive, and nourishing. So remember, love yourself enough to say, I will not allow disrespect in the name of love. Because the highest form of love is not found in suffering silently. It is found in standing tall with grace, knowing your worth, and choosing peace over pleasing. That's when love becomes not just an emotion, but a sacred space where both hearts can breathe freely. ChatGPT said, "You are not made to be ordinary. You are not sent into this world to merely survive, to fit in, to blend into the background like another face in the crowd. You were created with intention by a higher power for a purpose that no one else can fulfill the way you can." And yet, how many times have you lowered your value just to be accepted? How many times have you dimmed your light so others wouldn't feel insecure around you? How many times have you settled for less? Less respect, less love, less dignity, just to avoid being alone. This is what happens when you forget to value yourself the way God values you. Every soul on this earth is born with divine worth, but life has a way of making us forget. From the moment we are children, we are bombarded with comparisons. Look how well your cousin is doing. Why can't you be more like your friend? Don't aim too high, just be realistic. These words sink into our hearts, quietly whispering that we're not enough, that we need to shrink to be accepted. But let's pause for a moment and think deeply. If your Creator, the source of all wisdom and light, designed you with uniqueness, how dare you believe you are less? Look around you. Not a single leaf is identical. Not a single fingerprint is repeated. The skies, the stars, the oceans, they all reflect the majesty of creation, and so do you. Your voice, your mind, your experiences. No one else carries them in the exact same way. That alone is proof of your value. You don't need to wear expensive clothes or speak perfect words to be worthy. You are valuable simply because you exist. But the world doesn't always remind you of this. So you must remind yourself. Imagine a young man named Bilal. He works in a company where he constantly feels overlooked. Others are louder, more aggressive, and more noticeable. Bilal is gentle, thoughtful, and kind. But in a world that praises noise over depth, his presence often feels ignored. He starts questioning himself. Maybe I'm not cut out for success. Maybe I'm too soft to be respected. But one day, a colleague comes up to him and says, "I just wanted to thank you. Your calmness helped me through a really stressful day." That one comment changes something in Bilal. He realizes his value is not in being loud or flashy. It's in the quiet strength he carries, the peace he brings, the sincerity he offers. And slowly, he begins to stand taller. Not because others see him differently, but because he finally sees himself clearly. This is the shift that happens when you begin to value yourself. You stop waiting for others to clap for you, and you start clapping for yourself. You stop seeking validation from people who are too busy to see your worth. And you begin walking in the certainty that your worth was never meant to be decided by them anyway. When you recognize how God sees you, with love, mercy, with intention, you begin to treat yourself with more care. You speak to yourself more kindly. You forgive yourself more quickly. And most importantly, you stop placing your self-worth in the hands of people who wouldn't know what to do with it. Think about a priceless gem. Its value doesn't decrease just because someone fails to recognize it. It doesn't become less precious because it's covered in dust. In fact, only a trained eye can see its potential. Similarly, your value does not fluctuate based on who compliments you or who ignores you. The people who truly see you, the ones meant for your journey, will recognize your worth without you having to scream it out loud. But they can't do that until you recognize it first. This also means setting higher standards for how others treat you. When you value yourself, you stop entertaining half-effort relationships. You stop chasing people who make you feel like you're too much or not enough. You stop apologizing for being yourself. And instead, you begin choosing spaces and people that reflect your worth back to you. Let's take another daily example. A woman named Iman has always dreamed of starting her own business. But every time she shares her dream, people laugh it off. You're not that type. It's risky. Just stick with what you know. For years, she listens. She stays in a job that doesn't excite her, surrounded by people who don't believe in her. Until one day, she asks herself, if God gave me this dream, who am I to reject it just because can't see it? That question sparks a new beginning. Slowly, she starts taking small steps, learning, planning, saving. Eventually, she launches her idea, and to her surprise, it grows. Not because others changed, but because she finally honored the dream God placed in her heart. This is what happens when you yourself the way your Creator does. You stop playing small. You stop hiding behind fear. You begin to walk like you were made for something meaningful. Because you were. And the beautiful thing is, you don't need to prove it to anyone. Your growth, your peace, your joy, they will speak for themselves. You don't need a spotlight when you carry your own light within. So if you've ever felt unworthy, unnoticed, or unloved, let today be the day you return to truth. The truth that your value was never up for debate. It was sealed the moment you were created. You are not average. You are not replaceable. You are not a mistake. You are a reflection of divine thought, formed with care, filled with purpose. Walk like it. Speak like it. Live like it. And watch how the world begins to respond. Not because you shouted, but because you finally stood in the quiet power of your own worth.